So, today we're diving into a really fascinating guide by Rudolf Steiner. It makes this incredibly bold claim that there's a spiritual world hidden all around us. And this book is basically a step-by-step manual on how to see it. Let's get into it. Right from the start, the book throws this radical idea at you. It says that interwoven with our physical world, there's a spiritual dimension, and it's just as real as, the device you're watching this on. And here's the kicker. The ability to perceive it isn't some rare gift. It's a potential that's just sleeping inside all of us. And this quote, this is pretty much the core message of the entire book. Steiner's arguing that we're all born with these latent spiritual senses. It's like having dormant eyes and ears for a world that's beyond the physical. So the only real question is, how do we wake them up? And that's the big question, right? This isn't about blind faith or just wishing for it. Steiner presents this whole thing as a form of training, almost like a spiritual science, with very specific conditions and exercises. So what's the very first step on this path? Well, the path begins not with some complex ritual, but with a fundamental shift in our inner attitude. Steiner calls this the path of reverence, and he says it is the absolute essential first step before any other development can happen. Our modern culture kind of thrives on criticism and judgment. We're practically trained to find flaws in everything. But Steiner says this constant critical posture actually starves the very soul faculties we need to grow. The spiritual path, on the other hand, is nourished by reverence and admiration, not necessarily for people, but for the truth and the goodness that's hidden in all things. And this is so important because we're talking about a really deep internal discipline here. It's not just about, being polite on the outside. It's about actively training your mind to seek out the good, to hold back that quick critical judgment, and to really foster a sense of wonder, even in your most private thoughts. Okay, so once you have that foundation of reverence, the next practice is all about carving out a specific kind of mental space for yourself and doing it every single day. Steiner gives us a super practical exercise for this. For just a few minutes, you detach from your life. You look back on your own joys, your sorrows, your actions, but you do it with the calm impartiality of a total stranger. And when you do this, you start to see what truly matters and what's just noise. The whole point of this exercise is to connect with what Steiner calls the higher self, that part of you that isn't just tossed around by the waves of daily life. It's the calm, stable center that can guide you. And according to Steiner, strengthening this inner ruler is exactly what allows your spiritual senses to begin to grow. All right, so once you've got that foundation of reverence and inner peace down, the training gets a lot more structured. Steiner outlines 3 formal stages of what he calls initiation. First up is preparation, which is all about actively building the spiritual organs of perception. Next is illumination. And that's where those new senses begin to perceive the spiritual world, which now actually appears lit up. And finally, there's initiation, which is about forming a conscious, real relationship with the beings and forces of that world. Now, I know that might sound a little abstract, so let's make it way more concrete. What does an exercise for developing spiritual senses actually look like? Okay, here's a classic one right from the book. You take a simple seed, you look at it, and then you vividly imagine the full-grown plant that's going to come from it. Then you think about the powerful, invisible force that's locked inside that seed that makes this whole transformation possible, a force that, say, a perfect artificial copy of the seed would totally lack. You just let the feeling of this idea, the invisible will become visible, sink deep into your soul. So, according to Steiner, if you actually practice this with real focus and patience, something pretty remarkable starts to happen. You begin to perceive a new reality. The seed might appear to be surrounded by this little cloud of light, a kind of spiritual flame. You are literally training yourself to see the invisible life force that before was only just a concept. So, what about that next stage, illumination? What happens there? Well, this is where the world, which you can now perceive through your new spiritual senses, literally starts to light up. And that light, Steiner says, manifests as spiritual colors. Now, this is absolutely crucial. We're not talking about physical colors you see with your eyes. They are inner experiences that are analogous to color. So Steiner describes the spiritual quality of a stone as having a blue feel, a plant as green, and an animal's life force as red. You basically begin to perceive the inner nature of reality as this whole spectrum of soul qualities. So, you might be wondering, after all this work, what's the point? Is it really just to see auras and spiritual flames? For Steiner, the answer is a huge, definitive no. The true purpose of this whole journey is something much, much more profound. He lays out what he calls the golden rule for this entire path. The development of your spiritual sight must always be outpaced by the development of your own moral character. Any knowledge you gain has to be for the benefit of humanity, not for your own personal power or gain. Because ultimately, this whole journey is meant to transform you. The practices, they're designed to make you a calmer, more confident, more compassionate person. Seeing a hidden reality isn't really the goal itself. It's the byproduct of becoming a person who is worthy of seeing it. And that really leaves us with a final, kind of mind-bending thought, doesn't it? Steiner's guide is a map to a hidden world that he claims is right here, right now. If that's real, and if we could actually learn to see it, how would that change the way we look at a simple seed, or our fellow human beings, or even ourselves? What would change?